I'm Lora Windsor. I'm a social worker specializing in grief counseling for the last 20 years. And I have facilitated grief groups for Conley Outreach Community Service. One of the things that I have found is that grievers often turn to books to help them understand what their experiences are. And today I'm talking about a book that I have found early grievers find very helpful. Welcome to the Grief Club. I find that this is a good book, often a good book. It's not for everybody, but it's just right for many people. It's excellent for adults and adolescents. Heads up, the F word appears a time or two, and SH word appears a time or two, so that's just a heads up. Let me read a few things that are in the table of contents, the topics that are covered in the book. There's no right or wrong to grieve, no right or wrong way to grieve. It's okay to feel many things at the same time. Not all grief is the same. Grief isn't linear, but it does change. And getting along with your grief monsters. This author includes many visuals. Here's one example. A trigger bingo. Things that particularly trigger are sadness or anger. Here's another one. Topics that we often search online. Am I grieving correctly? What our brain goes through. There are visuals throughout the book. I suggest reading it cover to cover. I find that the author brings up topics that the early griever often doesn't realize that they are having trouble with that, or that that's an issue that might come up. And there's tips also on how to deal with some of the challenges. I'd like to give you some examples of how she approaches things. This one is called Death-iversaries Are a Thing. So she writes about those special days. It might be the anniversary date of the death. There are other special days, like maybe a wedding anniversary or a birthday, or the anniversary 1 year ago, the loved one was given a diagnosis. And then she has tips for how to manage those days. One that I found particularly helpful is called Your Body and Grief. She mentions the brain fog. She talks about muscle aches and pains, many ways that our bodies, a lot of people have told me they didn't realize how physical grief is. Another one is Everyday Acts of Resilience. She points out ways to increase your resilience and ways that you may already be resilient in dealing with your grief. My favorite is Unhelpful Things That People Say. And she has 3 or 4 different pages throughout the book. Unhelpful things people say. Everything happens for a reason. It was their time. Well, everyone dies eventually. They're in a better place now. These are things that often a griever finds hurtful when people say it to them. And she points it out. She has wonderful lists of hurtful things that people say. They're well-meaning. The people are well-meaning, but they come across as hurtful. Here's another favorite of mine. She includes this diagram to demonstrate that grief is not linear. It's not like every day we get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. It doesn't work like that. It works more like it's all over the place. Maybe up and down, maybe like a roller coaster, maybe like a mess, maybe more chaotic. I find that her visuals are right on target, and I'm a very visual person, maybe you are too. In closing, I'd like to point out one of the last topics that she covers. She calls grief monsters. Here are some of the grief monsters. You may want to make a sample of your own monster out of felt or some other art supply. And she describes them as things, our grief won't go away completely. We learn to live with it. We learn to live with the triggers. We learn to live with the sadness. We learn to live with the memories. And so she talks about, my favorite one is the last one here, that grief and joy can coexist. And she calls that a grief monster. It's some of the things that we learn to manage along the way in dealing with our grief. So this book is called Welcome to the Grief Club by Janine Kwoh, Kwoh. And you can get it at many libraries, bookstores, online. It's widely accessible. Thank you.